the language Common Core standards for all of elementary on one page. Now, it's not each one, but it allows you to look at that. And the reason that I have that is because that's what I was responsible for 3 years. I had children coming to me that were working at all those different levels and beyond. I had a girl working at the high school level that came to me as a sixth grader, her one and only year in Montessori school. So, you know, you're going to have that in your situation. You've got to kind of be ready to work with it. But I'm not going to go over this bit by bit. Now, but I did hand out by accident the color language summary. Do you all have that? You don't have to have it out, but if you do have it, that is going to be kind of an expansion of what you've got in front of you. I think I have a couple of them. Is it this? Yep. Okay, so I'm going to give one to you, and can you look on with her? Because who are our kinders? Okay, so I'm going to do that because it really does apply to them more, and these are on your drive. So if you want to print one out for yourself, they are on the drive. So you can get to it, you just wouldn't necessarily have a hard copy. So I want you to notice the strands that are there, because that's one of the ways I would like you to be thinking about this. Let's see if I have my own with me. Ah, good. So I don't have to take one back. So you can see the relationship between the black and white paper that I gave you and this one. There are interrelationships between all of these strands, but it's going to be worthwhile for you to think about them in these discrete ways. Some of you, the ship has sailed for your students on oral language in a lot of ways. You know, if they're 8 or 9, certainly they're still going to learn a language. Many of us learn a foreign language as an adult, but there's a lot of things on here that are not going to be worth your time. Approaching it more visually or with more traditional ways of teaching language remediation may be appropriate for you. For the kinders, this is really, really essential. And as I always kind of give you the overview from a traditional Montessori perspective, this is the secret to why children can write to read. You have to be able to hear all those sounds in the English language as you learn to trace and associate the symbol with the sandpaper letter. If you've had all of this oral preparation, not all the way down to the bottom in public speaking, but you know, down through the learning songs, I Spy, conversation skills, reciting tales, those kinds of things, you have to have that to be able to do the Montessori writing to read. But that ship has sailed for your children. That's a 3.5 to 4.5, maybe 5-year-old phenomenon. And so to expect that to happen that way is not realistic. That's the reason that I do pink, blue, green, because I've always had classrooms where there were children who that ship had sailed and we could not do the traditional writing to read progression of Montessori language. Does that make sense for some of my newer folks? Now, language patterns, you would think of this as vocabulary, word study. It's just any way that we group words together to better understand them in order to use them. You know, we don't sort synonyms. Typically, as adults, we sort rhyming words if we like to write poetry or things, but sorting synonyms and classifying words by their parts of speech, those are ways that children just increase their vocabulary and their understanding of how to use the words. Now, the alphabet and phonics, I was really happy to see the link that Nicole sent me to. I can't remember the name of it. It's the reading that you're doing. There's 5 approaches to it. It's just an adjective. Balanced? Balanced literacy. There we go. Balanced literacy. So the whole language thing and the, phonics won't do it for you thing, it's not my experience. But I have to tell you, one reason it's not is because, thank you. Okay. One reason I don't believe that phonics won't do it is because I've seen it do it since I was 9 years old, because I started teaching children to read with phonics when I was 9 years old. I got to third grade in a new school, and the third grade teacher didn't know what to do with me because I could read anything she put in my hands, and I was embarrassing some of her children who had been at the top of the class, and she just wanted to be rid of me for reading time in the nicest possible way, and I couldn't spell, so she didn't know what to do with me. So she sent me to the principal in a good way, and I read for the principal, who was also the first grade teacher, small private parochial school, and she said after about 3 minutes, okay, tomorrow at 9 o'clock you come to my room. And I read with first graders for the next 2 years during reading time in third and fourth grades, because that's what you do when you're a small school. You use the resources that you have. So I have literally been teaching people how to read for almost 50 years. And phonics works, okay? It does. It's not the whole story, and I was just saying, Nicole, that I loved that balanced literacy thing that you sent me. The only thing I will disagree with is their history, when they say, first there was look-say, and then there was language and whole whole language. Then there was phonics, and there was whole language. Sorry, well, phonics came well before look-say did, and there's that's a whole story in itself, but it's not one that we need to tell today. But I am going to show you how I believe that middle track, that alphabet and phonics, can be done in a drill fashion. It's drill. It's calling it anything else is just, a misnomer, but it is drill, but it's done in a way that is respectful of the children in my experience. So if you look at the very first page on that little packet that Nicole put together for you, small group work and flashcard use. I made reference to this yesterday in a couple of ways. If you look down at the bottom, that's kind of a more organized version of the spiel that I did about puzzle words. If you're not a Montessori person, you probably call them sight words, maybe high frequency words, but the basic principle is it makes no sense to ask children to memorize them when with a little help they can decode them. And that's what that top 12 keywords, top 20 keywords cards that are over on the pink, blue, green table are about. Not that long ago, I was in the position of taking over the responsibility for being the lead educator in an upper elementary Montessori classroom in a public school, a charter public school. And it was a huge responsibility. I found that it challenged me on several different levels. I had a lot of Montessori background. I had taught older children within an elementary classroom that mostly included younger children, but that was my first time teaching children from age 9 to 12 and being responsible for the Montessori curriculum for children who would be the equivalent of 4th, 5th, and 6th graders in the United States. Not only was I responsible for teaching them the Montessori curriculum, but I was also responsible for the state standards for the school where I was teaching, because that's the nature of teaching Montessori in a public school. And I found myself completely overwhelmed. If it wasn't parent communication or a behavioral challenge in the classroom or not knowing how to keep track of the progress on all of those state standards for which I was responsible, making sure the children made progress, it was just the whole situation of that new routine. I have found that if you do everything for someone, it's not a good thing. They don't learn very well, but I've also found that if you expect someone to do more than they can possibly do in the hours that they have available, they are definitely not going to succeed nor serve the children in the best way. So I have created something that I am calling a Montessori Co-op, a co-op for consulting that allows those schools that have educators starting out or who are very new to the Montessori classroom to have some of those responsibilities done for them and to have a way to check in. a way to have observations done by an experienced Montessori educator who can give them good feedback and help them learn how to find the solutions that they need. If you are looking for parent newsletters, lesson plans, correlation from the Montessori curriculum to the Common Core state standards of the United States, this is something that I can help you with. Our cooperative can allow you for a very reasonable amount of money to have some of these things done for your teachers. Allow them to be at their best. Allow them to learn from where they're starting. Meet them where they are. Let them have Montessori education be as joyful an experience as you are seeking to provide for the students in your school. If we can help you, we are happy to be that resource that lets your students and your teachers make the most of the coming school year. So, how do we get the sounds in of the letters? Well, there's a lot of different ways that we can do this, and the traditional Montessori approach, as you might guess, is a 3-period lesson. Ba. This is ba, period 1. Ba. F. Show me f. Show me ba. Okay, that's period 2. What is this? What is this? Okay, so that's a 3-period lesson, and it works, but not unless you do it a lot or you have some magic. And the magic of the hand on the sandpaper letters for the child of 3.5 to 5, and usually not much after that, that's the magic of the writing to read thing. If you don't have that going for you, if that window has closed in the brain, you've got to do something different. And this is one reason I mentioned yesterday that Sharon Caldwell, probably one of the most stick to authentic Montessori colleagues and friends that I have, says pink, blue, green, but for elementary. Because if the ship is sailed, then pink, blue, green is fine. If you can learn to read by writing, by all means, you want to set up the child to be able to do that. But if that period is sailed, then the pink, blue, green is a reading program that is developmentally appropriate and Montessori congruent if the child missed that opportunity to learn to read by writing when the sensitive period of the hand and the eye and the language all was at that sort of magic spot. Does that kind of make sense for those of you who come from a Montessori perspective? And I can talk more to the two of you about it, on after lunch. But before we go to lunch, before you go to your stations, there's 2 things that I want to do. I want to show you how I do the 2-minute thing, so you kind of know how to do it, and if you want to practice it, that's where I'm going to be for the beginning of our station time before we go to lunch. And yeah, I'll do that, and then I'll set up these pieces. So if it's pink, how many sounds do you think these letters are going to have? One. Because we're not even going to teach the second sound of S with a pink card. That's why it's pink. Just has 1 sound. So we do teach the vowels, but we don't teach, and Y is a vowel as well as a consonant. We only teach it as a consonant at this level. It's just ya. This is just e, a, I, a at this level. This is qua. Okay. Some of these letters, if you say them the way they would sound at the end of a word, you will isolate the sound better for the children. This is not la. This is ol, okay? And that, particularly if they didn't have all that oral language background, is going to be very, very important. Now, some of them do have the second sounds on the back of it. That's for your benefit if you're working with these cards with the children. Now, because I do have the second sounds I do have the additional sounds of the vowels, if you want to practice, the vowels are what's tricky to practice, so you could use a pink set to practice your vowels. Typically, what happens is, at blue, we start to introduce the additional sounds of the letters. What do you think is the first sound we introduce for this letter? Yes. Where do you see this in English words, mostly? at the end, or at the end of the first syllable, okay? So box, fox, boxes. So that's why we teach the most common one. This has 3 sounds. Do you know all 3? X, gz, as in exist, and z. This is where, for some of the children, I'll teach them the letters around the letter can make it change its sound a little bit. Just because it's too hard to pronounce it in isolation, we slur them together. So when I was teaching a 5th grader phonics, that's one of the things that I said to her, because that was something that was useful for her, whereas for a younger child it wouldn't be. So let me pull out, okay. So this is what the vowels would typically look like when we're working with them. So I would do something like this. So when we do our 2 minutes, we have this procedure. My turn, your turn, our turn. And at the beginning, I do use the gestures. So if I'm pointing at me, you're silent and you're listening. And so for very young children, I'm pointing at my ear sometimes. Then I don't point at people because it's rude, but I will open my hand to the group, and that's how you know it's your turn. I don't say it because I'm listening, because I'm working with maybe 5 or 6 children, so I can kind of hear who is saying it. And that's the second period, or is the second part. And then the last one is we say it all together. And for those of you who are Montessorians, this is period 1.5. Okay? In our 3 periods, you never have a chance to say it with assistance. Period 1 is I say it. Period 2 is I say it, and you just pick. Period 3 is you have to say it. You never say it with me. So I added in period 1.5. And this is a great place to do period 1.5, because you don't say it by yourself. You say it with your friends, and then you even say it with your adult leader. Okay? So this is why this is Montessori. It's period 1.5, these groups. A, 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 A. A, say it with me. A, A. I, I, E. I, E. And I do have on the back of it. I've dropped that at this point because it will occasionally say the schwa sound, but it's one of the ones that we usually don't schwa out. It tends to do something different that is beyond this. So I just teach the 3, even though some of the cards will still have that on it. Your master won't. Okay. U, 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 And some of you want to see that because you want to know what? Okay. First sound of U, the short sound. 2 long sounds of U. Both the name of the letter and U are considered long sounds of U. And then is the 3rd sound. It has no 4th sound. Why? Because the 4th sound is its short vowel sound. Its short sound is the schwa sound. So there is no 4th sound of either I or U. A, O, U, A. A, O, U, A. Flapdoodle. Okay. Now some children will do that. Most of them kind of look at me like that, and I say, and then some of them will say, "It doesn't look like a flapdoodle to me, Miss Susan. It looks like a rocket." And I said, "Oh, you're right. It is a rocket." This is just to put some fun into there, okay? I can even say, it says "t." Okay, you would never say that until you knew that group had all mastered that. So then I would say, "No, Miss Susan, it's a rocket." So I have a whole set of these, and it's just to make it fun because you never spend more than 2 minutes on this. If you do, it's not good practices. I will fight you tooth and nail. I will fight tooth and nail to have you do it every day with every child for 2 minutes. But If you do it more than that, you're going to blow it. And can you see how if I hadn't been narrating it for you, I could do maybe 10 or 15 in 2 minutes, and then we're done, and we're on to the next thing. So that's what that top handout in your small group work and flashcard use is. You can do it with things like the punctuation marks. You can do it with your numerals. Now, I would not do it with the fractions that way. I'd do it with the way the numbers on top of one another like they're used to it. But you can do that as long as you stay under 2 minutes. As long as they're not sitting with you more than that, then you're good. Does this make sense? And can you see how this frequency and repetition done in that way can be a light, fun, and appropriate way for them to get those sounds? So everything that you need to know except for the really tricky ones. And some of you can kind of tell I bugged out of a classroom rather quickly, and so I don't have all the things that I would like to have with me here, but here are the tricky ones. So what does that say? Okay, it can't say it because this is a green card. Okay, it's shh as in nation. Do you know both sounds of this? Shh and zh. Tension, vision. Okay, shh in facial. Yeah. So some of you are going to want to practice. It's all good. I. And see, this is pretty easy because you don't see this in another configuration. Of course, you see this in tip or, sip for the others and things, but the only time you tend to see this is in words where it says it's long I sound. How about this one? And, oh. Okay. That's an easy one. Okay. And you. Oo as in grew, you as in few. Okay. You do not. You don't say foo.
I say few.
Few.
And what was the other one? Grew.
Grew.
Because it depends where you're from.
But if you said oo for few, you would be saying foo.
I guess you're right.
Yeah. See? No, I do know my phonics. Okay, are you ready for a really hard one? I referred to it yesterday. Ow, o, oo, and you if you add Houston, Texas. Is there any wonder this is tricky for children? But do you see how this can actually train their brain that when they see this letter combination, that's what they're going to run through? Sounding out words in English is educated guessing, but if you have this content in your brain, you're going to make a heck of a lot more educated guesses than if you haven't been taught it. And this is the reason that I believe phonics is completely important and completely appropriate. Those 10% of children who show up at the end of kindergarten or the beginning of first grade reading who didn't have parents that did, teach your baby to read or whatever, they're ones that they just kind of absorb the code. Mom, dad, auntie, grandma read to them and it just kind of went in. And there are going to be a few of those, but they are fewer and farther between than you might think. And the ones that do that, but they do it later, if you give them this, their time in biology classes with all that vocabulary, those kinds of things is going to be much better. Does that kind of make sense? And of course, these are going to be on your drive. So